Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new edition of Talking About EAL. I hope those of you in the Northern Hemisphere are having a good beginning of an academic year. I'm speaking to you from the city of La Plata in Argentina. So we're finishing the winter here rather than the summer. But I know many of you are going back to classes, to your jobs and your various duties. And I hope all of that is going very well as classes begin. I am Leandro Paladino. I am one of the deputy editors of the EAL journal, which is published by NALDIC. NALDIC is celebrating its 30th anniversary this year, so it's a very special year. The conference this year in November is more special than ever because of the celebrations. You can already book your places. It's an online full-day conference on the 19th of November. That's a Saturday. And because it's online, you can attend from anywhere in the world. The theme for this year is Every Teacher is a Language Teacher, which is interesting because it resonates with some of the topics that we'll be covering today with Eugenia. Eugenia Carrion Canton is also in Argentina. She lives very far away from where I am in Tierra del Fuego, which is one of the southernmost parts of Argentina, indeed of the world. And it's going to be a pleasure to talk today about translanguaging and critical citizenship. Remember that all of us at NALDIC are open to teachers and practitioners who might want to contact us, and in particular the journal, to publish new ideas. You can contact us via our website, naldic.org.uk, and find your way to the journal there. One of the new sections in the journal is EAL Essentials, a review of topics that sometimes we take for granted, but that it's good to review and refresh. In fact, the upcoming issue will be about translanguaging, so look out for that when the next issue appears. So without further ado, let me see if Eugenia is there so that she can join. Hello, my dear Eugenia.
Hi, how are you? So nice to see you.
Yes,
Can you
you
hear me
too.
well?
I can hear you perfectly well. Why don't you begin by telling us where you are in the
Oh, well,
confines of the world?
at the end of the world, I would say, right? Yes, I'm based in Tierra del Fuego. I'm living in the city of Rio Grande, that is in the north part of the island. So, well, here I am. But it seems that thanks to technology, it seems that distances are not even considered.
Absolutely. I'm actually in the middle of the country. You're in the south of the country. And next week, we'll be meeting in the north of the country where we will both attend and speak at an in-person conference where you will actually be touching on topics similar to the topics we're going to talk about today. But before that, can you tell us a little bit more generally, something about your background, your interests, what it is that you're passionate about? This week is special in Argentina because it's Teachers' Day, so we are celebrating ourselves, we are celebrating our professions, what about you and the world of teaching?
Well, first of all, let me tell you that we are really so excited because we are about to have FAAPI conference, that is an international conference that we organize every year in a different part of Argentina. So I would like to invite all teachers of English to join us in this first face-to-face conference after the pandemic. So we are very happy about that. Well, something that I would like to say about myself is that I am an educator who teaches English, I would say. And well, among some of the things that I've been through, because I'm a teacher of English, I've got a diploma in literature, in English literature. I've also got a diploma in educational management, and I'm working on my final dissertation for my master's degree in education. But this is like the formal stuff. I'm a passionate teacher, like most of us, I would say, the ones who join us today. I enjoy exploring other areas that are very close to the teaching and learning of English, and that have great impact on both teachers and learners, right, of any foreign or additional language. And my areas of interest, as you mentioned, right, are related to critical citizenship mainly, and also critical media literacy. I don't know if, yes, I saw you like stuck. You listened to me well then. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay,
yes, I
great,
think we're
fantastic.
following.
And well, some let's say in the recent years, I've been exploring into the world of translanguaging and plurilingualism as well. So I'm learning together with, let's say, many of you, my colleagues, about this world of translanguaging that has been there for forever, I would say. And now that we are, let's say, given this formal visibility, I'm so happy about.
Why don't we start, okay, by maybe giving some sort of a basic definition of translanguaging, because just like many people are likely to have heard about it or have even worked or explored the concept, maybe not everybody listening necessarily. So what could we provide as a basic definition of translanguaging?
Something that I consider important to mention about translanguaging, because of course we have big names in that field like Ofelia Garcia, and actually, right, I think that she's the one that in my personal view provides a very clear definition of translanguaging. But something that I would like to highlight is that translanguaging and this making reference to the act of translanguaging, I would say, to be performed, is something that has been included in the world of ELT by non-natives of the language as a need, as a necessity to show the process that involved learning another language apart from the mother tongue, I would say, right, or the first language. So making this visible in the sense that making, let's say, this awareness on this process that happens when we learn a different language from the language that we learn when we start speaking, I would say. But formally, we can say that it's the act. First of all, that is a pedagogy, an approach, right, towards the applied linguistics. And that is this act performed by, at the very beginning in the origin, by bilingual, well, English Welsh, right, learners, but by bilingual learners of accessing, and this is something that is interesting. The act that has been performed in order to access to different linguistic features, or right, this autonomous way of speaking, autonomous various modes of accessing to language, in order to become, let's say, or to develop this communicative potential. That would be, in Ofelia Garcia's words, I would say, a very clear definition. But that is something that caught my attention, because that has to do with accessing, right, to the learning of a new language. And it's all about that. That's why I'm so passionate about talking about the fact that the English language as a foreign language, or in this case, English language, but any other foreign or additional language, or second language, I would say, if the context is so, should be democratized in terms of accessing to that, providing that teacher and that learning all the elements in order to, let's say, get that new language closer, right, to his or her own trajectory, to that repertoire, I would say.
Right. That sounds very interesting. Languaging can be seen from different layers, right? Because I think on the one hand, the teacher's individual use of the language, and the question of how can a teacher who doesn't speak all of his or her students' languages can actually empower and open the space for those languages which you may not speak as a teacher, but which still may find a presence in our classrooms is, I think, something to think about, right? I don't speak Chinese, I don't speak French, but how can I empower the speakers of my students who speak those languages, which I don't necessarily, and to find ways to open those voices and those languages in our multilingual classrooms.
Definitely, Leandro, and the fact that we make room for that to happen, and that is totally related to a change of paradigm, I would say, because for many years, this process that, whether we like it or not, happened, right, in the learner of a new language, was quite forbidden in the English class, I would say, or in the foreign or in the additional language class, because it was believed that this, let's say, context of monolingual context favored the learning, right, of the new language. On the one hand, I would agree up to a point there, right? But I have to acknowledge the fact that we are, let's say, reducing, concising this vision to one aspect of the learner only. So that's why it's so important, in my opinion, to consider this. I mean, what is it that this learner brings with him or with her, right? Which is, I mean,
exactly.
who is she? Who is he, right? And all this cultural background that it will enhance and enrich this learning process, actually.
Sometimes I think it's even contradictory that if we take as a starting point in the classroom that the students come to our class with background knowledge, with a whole set of ideas, that they're not blank slates, clean slates, that we need to, well, one other element that they bring with them can be other languages that they also speak. So it will be contradictory to think that we need to respect students' prior knowledge and that cannot include, should not include the various languages that they speak, and maybe to think that they will not be able to learn English well or to adapt to an English-speaking schooling system if they can at the same time maintain their home languages.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. That has, for example, something that is quite visible in terms of linguistic practice has to do with the pronunciation, right? Not so long ago, right, pronunciation was something to copy, to standardize, to, let's say, frame, right, within some aspects, I would say, that are necessary in order to understand, to make communication effective, I would say, and possible among speakers of any language. But it was not long ago, actually, that we started little by little, and especially, I would say, I would dare to say, that in countries where, in this case, if we're talking about English, where English is not spoken, that we were so straightforward and so not flexible at all, right, to consider that phonetic and phonological phenomenon, something like, I would say, totally pure, right?
Let me tell you, okay, that, sorry to interrupt, but
yeah.
reviewing EAL resources, that is, materials for students that are actually living and studying and attempting to become part of a schooling system in a new country, I've been surprised to see how those resources, when it comes to their pronunciation component, and particularly these days, with apps and all the technology that allows the practice of languages with technologies, how the view is not very different from what you are describing, because the model is still the native speaker. And on the one hand, you can argue, well, there has to be a model or a standard of some kind. But on the other hand, it's debatable and it's arguable, to say the least, whether apps that even give you points, you get points from 1 to 10, depending on how good your pronunciation of particular words or phrases is. And of course, it's automated. The feedback that you get and the scoring that you get is automated. So it says, all right, kind of good, you get a 6, or very good, you get an 8, or excellent, you get a 10. And it makes you wonder how the system is prepared and what allowances it makes for intelligibility, even without sounding like a native speaker of any particular language. And that's for EAL resources for students and pupils and children who actually become part of an English-speaking community.
Yeah, definitely. And also, I think that this is something that we should consider at, as you mentioned, right, at higher education, at teacher education. This is something I'm not saying, actually, I'm not, I don't mean, right, not to consider model notes at all, but just to enlarge, include, right, and accept what students bring with them. That is also part of the style of what what the teacher is going to be like, the speed, the rhythm, that has to do, right, and considering other things like register, like variety of vocabulary, right, but not like chopping down personality of teacher when he or she speaks in English. And I think that translanguaging goes in that direction, right, in including, in showing the world in a different language who I am, which is my, as you mentioned at the very beginning of my talk, who I am, what are my interests, what is my academic background, what do I have to offer in terms of education to the community, right, to the teaching community, to my students, right, and what to learn. So I would say that, well, I work for that. I've been in teacher education for more than 20 years, and I deeply believe that we should enhance, right, and enrich the vision when it comes to teacher and to work for future teachers.
I often think, okay, now I don't know if how you see this about translanguaging, that in terms of layering, there's the layer of the teacher within the classroom, as we were saying, and then the layer of those of us in supervision roles, you know, that coordinate other teachers, supervise their work, you know, heads or directors. And then at the more institutional level, whether our role as supervisors is to help the teachers to develop their own let's say idiolect, their own translanguaging idiolect, if you will, that is their own style in how they feel comfortable and how they can feel that they can respect their students' learning styles and their students' backgrounds. And then at an institutional level, maybe the importance of having a school, a whole school language policy that lays down, however flexibly, a number of guidelines in terms of how that particular institution is supposed to operate.
Definitely. I'm very happy to see that universities nowadays, this new group of universities of the 20th century in Argentina and in the world, and let's say teacher training colleges go in that direction. I would say that there are many examples in the rest of Argentina that is not Buenos Aires, I would say, right, where this is going on, right? We can think about Neuquén, we can think about, well, in province of Buenos Aires, in Tierra del Fuego as well, right? In which we think in our curriculum design other manners, right, or other concerns in the development of let's say teacher education for, let's say, for English, more focus on the applied linguistics, on the let's say the focus on access related to learning, to including other areas, other contents that actually in real life, when teachers go to school and let's say at different levels, they would be, let's say, facing that reality, that they should be working with others, that they should, let's say, articulate contents with others, and let's say working in collaboration with other professionals. So I'm very happy to see that, right? And young generations go in that direction. I'm very emphatic on the development of teacher education, because if it doesn't change there, it doesn't change.
And speaking of teacher education, okay, what can we say to teachers who might say, well, I receive Chinese-speaking students or German-speaking students or French-speaking students, but I don't speak those languages myself, as we were saying earlier, what can we tell them, do you think? In what ways can they enable those languages? In what ways can those languages be present, even if the teacher doesn't speak those languages himself or herself?
Well, I'm having some mate, first of all, if you don't mind, right? That is
Not at all.
my favorite.
An Argentinian thing, if
Right.
there is one, right?
Of course. Whenever we think we have mate that is here with us. So I really like to share this with you. I'm having mate with you.
Enjoy.
So something that we can say about that is that allow your students to teach you. Make room for that word, that phrase to come into the classroom. Tackle that situation as a teaching situation, right? Embrace that new language, because I'm sure that if the student brings, and not only a new, let's say, a new language, but a new variety of language, right? There are many terms, even in Spanish, that we don't understand because we are older than our students, because the register is different. So, but if the student brings that into the classroom, there is something behind that it should be discussed. So in my personal opinion, that is what I do with my students. Whenever there is something that is not clear for me, but that is very important for them, because that meaning that they want to put through is something important they want to communicate. And actually, in the end, we learn languages not only to learn about the world, but for the world to know us, and to stand up for our own ideas and be able to develop our ideas in different languages for the world to hear.
Perhaps we should also say that translanguaging is, like any construct, not accepted by everybody necessarily, or there are both practitioners or researchers that at the very least express caution about their use. And this is perhaps in common with everything, right? Technology, well, technology is neither good nor bad. It depends on how you employ it, whether it will be put on. I've read, for example, studies where translanguaging was enabled, and maybe one language was more powerful than the other, more prestigious, then a tendency for students to maybe preferring to use that more prestigious language. So powerful and sensible as the construct sounds, it requires situated application where we need to think about each particular context, right?
Definitely. Yeah, it has to do with that. It has to do with power. So that's why we don't forget the language we communicate in, but we highlight what we are communicating. For me, that is something that is as important as the language in which you are communicating that. Of course, I am a teacher. I'm a teacher trainer. I focus on the development of my teachers to do their best to become great teachers. But of course, something that really concerns me, it has to do with what is it that you're going to teach apart from English or in English? Not to put away that citizenship role, right? Teaching is a political act, and we shouldn't forget that. No matter what you teach, you are transmitting a message, encouraging students to do, mentoring them to grow. So, it doesn't matter what you teach. It is what is it that you want to communicate what matters.
You say political, and you reminded me of what I currently find to be the most fascinating debate in relation to translanguaging. It kind of shocked me a little bit a few years ago when I first saw about it, which is whether we accept or not named languages, discrete languages as such, whether we accept that Spanish and French and German have clear-cut boundaries, and this new well, if we even look at the work of Ophelia Garcia, and we'll look back at the past 20 years, we can see that, however, gradually she has shifted her position from not, if not advocating for, at least not rejecting the idea that named languages are separate entities in their own right. And then later, under the influence of Pennycook, for example, she started entering the deconstructivist turn of translanguaging, as they've called it. This idea that we say, no, French doesn't exist as such. And I happen to be reviewing, I've got here a book that I'm reviewing for the next issue of the journal. Well, it reads backwards on the screen, doesn't it? Multilingual perspectives on translanguaging, editing by Jeff McSwan. And when I first read the title, I thought, you know, what can it add to the already vast existing literature, you know? And the key word is on the multilingual, because if we accept that there are no separated languages, that there are no boundaries, then the prefix multi stops making sense, you know? And many things connected even with sociolinguistics begin to, if not be cancelled, at least they begin to be more limited. So I find this to be, and the jury's still out, of course, and I don't think I'm in a position to take sides one way or the other. And the debate, I think, however theoretical it is, has and will have many practical implications, like for policy making, among other things.
Definitely, yes. We cannot, I mean, again, I would say that whether we acknowledge the fact that this is a separate language or not, that this is something, that debate would be within, right, either multilingualism, plurilingualism, and when translanguaging, and all the other pedagogies related to translanguaging and plurilingual pedagogies. The fact that we make room for this to happen is something enormous, in my humble opinion, because it is to make like in an overt version of that process of learning, right, that happens whether we like it or not, by association, right, by linguistic, I mean, the context we are immersed in, by experiencing other languages. Actually, we do the other way around. Even if you let's say consciously do not want to learn English, in this case as a foreign language, in the case of Argentina, right, we are surrounded by words in English that we have already incorporated and that we use all the time, and that we switch from a language to another, right, actually, right, in many occasions without even knowing what is the meaning of that word. I'm talking about, I mean, about people that who incorporate that without considering the fact of learning, right, a foreign language. So this process is part of the learning process, of the learning of the language, that has been acknowledged by, right, well, the academia, I would say, and that it should be explored. And that's why, I mean, what I said some minutes ago, the fact that it was, I mean, the ones who pushed that to happen were those who are not native speakers. So the main, let's say, representative of translanguaging, we think about Galante, for example, that is a Brazilian, right, academic. We think about Ophelia, right, that is also
Tunesh Kanagaraja as well. They're all like embodiments of bilingualism and multicultural perspectives on life. And in any case, what I think, whenever I see like this big debate taking on at the moment, well, maybe it's a sign of a profession and of a science moving forward when there is disagreement, and the fact of, you know, how important a construct can be when there are actually such debates like this that keep pushing forward professional thinking.
And what is it that we are going to do with that, right? In which way we will, let's say, include that approach in our classes, right? So I think that, well, I'm very happy about that, I would say.
So, okay, what about one of your other areas of interest, critical citizenship? Just like we did with translanguaging, how can we provide a basic definition, which we can then explore a little bit as well? And what link does it have with translanguaging on the other hand?
Well, actually, I'm delivering a talk in FAAPI that is going to be about that, the relationship between translanguaging and critical
Oh,
citizenship.
spoiler alert. I'm sorry. So
No,
go as
you're
far
not.
as you
You're
can
not.
go.
Not at all, right? And can give you right, like
Right.
a synopsis of that, right? But something that I've always been interested in, as I told you at the very beginning of the talk, on some other areas of knowledge that had a great impact in the teaching, in this case of English, I would say. Because I'm sure that you share these ideas. I've grown up in a social context in which being a teacher of English was related, I would say, because it's not that any longer. I'm happy for that. Something that was totally disconnected from the real world. It was, of course, I'm overgeneralizing situations, right? But I mean, the teacher of English taught English in a way that was not down to earth for the other subjects, or at least that was the way in which that was seen by other areas of knowledge. So I've been always trying to connect that. So as I said before, social justice was something that really matters for me, because I'm an advocate for the democratization of education, and especially, right, for the teaching and the learning of English as an additional language, at any level, at any context, in any situation. So critical citizenship brought that to me when I met for the first time an author that I deeply admire and I follow. Actually, we shared that with Mariano Quinterno, right? That is Raewyn Connell. Raewyn Connell created this concept of curricular justice. And from that concept, she explored the concept of critical citizenship. Of course, she is a sociologist, and she well, I invite you to explore on her. She's fantastic. She's really mind-blowing, I would say. And I had the opportunity, because, well, Tierra del Fuego, it's a province that well, gives great opportunities to all of us, and I have to thank my province for that. I had the possibility of interpreting Raewyn Connell in a conference, in an international conference, and it was something I from that moment onwards, I couldn't stop reading her any longer. So something she mentioned about critical citizenship is that it's not an univocal concept, and that is a concept that is made up of other three areas. On the one hand, we may say social justice, with this concept of curricular justice she develops, and also with a concept that she also explored, that is the concept of citizenship, that together with other authors, but in her view, right, is something that works like in two different levels that are contradictory, but that in education work together. I will refer to that. And also what she, let's say, considers good education. So these three elements make up the concept of critical citizenship. That is, and this goes in line with the national documents in Argentina related to education and to the teaching of languages as well, right? We in not
Sum
only
up the three elements, it will be social justice,
citizenship, and good education.
and good education.
So I will expand on that at FAAPI, but something I can tell you about citizenship in terms of political role, I would say. She says that Connell believes that it is citizenship is it's a concept that is made up of two other contradictory concepts that only in education go together. On the one hand, this concept that citizenship is a principle that of regulation of social control, she says. And think about that at school. And on the other hand, citizenship is related to the claim for rights. And this also happens at school. So the two ideas together, right, intertwine, right, in the development of the process of the learner at school. So I think, right, of course, I totally agree with that. And I see that, I mean, the way in which we foster this to happen in Freire's work with the praxis, I would say, this awareness and this practice and the reflection over this action, right? That is, I would say, that is the influence of that teacher over the development of citizenship and critical citizenship, in the sense of not being critical, right, to criticize something, but to make the context being, I mean, to be aware of the context you're immersed in, and at the same time to provide something that has an impact on that context. So
I was wondering, assuming that maybe teachers of a language have in general made a move towards understanding the link of their subject matter with social justice and critical citizenship, what can we say to teachers of other areas? Suppose that somebody says, well, I teach math, I teach science, I teach, physics. What can I do with that? Is there a link at all? I don't feel that I've got any impact, any outreach onto doing critical citizenship if I teach physics or math or natural sciences.
I would say that this is not, I would push these teachers in the same way as I do with my English teachers. Anyway, I would say that, I mean, the development of critical citizenship in teaching in the world of ELT or in other areas of teaching is not a content, but it's an approach. It's an approach to materials, to teaching situations, right? To the acknowledgement of the context you are immersed in. And in terms of Argentinian education, it's not a choice. All the norms, the law of education, and the documents that are written for us to be prepared as teachers consider, as we mentioned some minutes ago, three, let's say, axes, I would say. The learning axis, that is the specific, let's say, the specific curriculum area, I would say, that you teach. The intercultural acts as well, and also the citizenship acts, sorry. So whenever we teach whatever you are teaching, you must consider these two other, let's say, points or aspects, right, to develop. So it is on us and on our planning to make that visible. And you mentioned some minutes ago the role of coordinators, of deans, chancellors, and all that, right, in institutions. Well, that is the focus. Whether this happens at school or not, whether students learn by doing, and they learn and contribute to their own communities, and they develop collaborative work with other areas. And I see that, well, this is something we share with many educators. And that's why, again, right, it seems that I'm becoming old because I'm repeating ideas. But
it's not repetition, it's recycling, it's reviewing, it's going back.
Okay. But that's why I'm saying I'd like to be called an educator who teaches English. We work together with many other educators. I was just looking at the chat, and thank you very much for all the people that join us today. And I saw Graciela Fabili there. Graciela Fabili is a fantastic, it's a great representative of education, of higher education, a teacher at university, right, who works on applied linguistics as well in the area of Spanish, right, and that is all the time, right, expanding the boundaries of content. So, well, it's a matter of considering not only reading the documents, but let's say make this this frames, these national and international frames, visible in our community of practices.
That's so very interesting, and I keep thinking about, as I told you, materials that one keeps reviewing, and where sometimes the focus still seems to stop at the lexical accuracy or the grammatical correction or the pronunciation, as we said today. Well, one of the workshops that I will be doing at the conference where we're going to meet will have to do with idioms. And I was surprised to see how the traditional approach that I've always seen in the TESOL background that I come from, like you, when I started exploring English as an additional language and looking at resources, also the same kind of limited view, for example, with idioms, equating them as one-to-one correspondences with non-idiomatic expressions. So you get the idiom and the definition, the idiom and the definition, and how much more there is to actual idiomatic use, and how we can, well, to put it quite bluntly, even make a fool of ourselves when we use idioms wrongly in an additional language. So to still see that in this day and age, the treatment of something relatively small, you could argue, such as idioms, is still treated in that decontextualized way, as if the concept of exact synonymy actually existed, which of course it doesn't. If there are two different ways of saying something, there are normally relatively significant differences between them, So it has surprised me when I've compared my TESOL background into the EAL that I've been developing and looking at in recent years, how much, how far away we can still be from, because this is the other extreme. When we talk about social justice, we're going so much further than that. But to the extent that in the materials design perspective and also teacher education, as you said, maybe we are still limited to more superficial matters, to, whether the exact word, not from the socio-pragmatic perspective. If anything, let's look at if the vocabulary is appropriate or not from a socio-pragmatic perspective, not simply from the perspective of, the traditional lists of vocabularies and those things that students of an additional language normally have to go through in order to become competent at new languages.
Definitely. Well, we've got a lot of work to do, right, to work on that. I think that what you mentioned is it's a part of the teaching task, I would say, but it's not all. And materials are there for teachers to mediate. So it is our task to provide that is not there in the material to our students. It's not on the material. It's onto the approach towards the material, in my opinion, right? So we are not going to see materials that cater for all the needs. And the idioms are just idioms, right? The point is, what is it that you do with that? I mean, bunch of idioms, right, in your class, in order to make them meaningful to our students, to make room to discover, let's say, our own culture and cultures in that class, and to expand those boundaries in order to make them, let's say, not only appealing and sensible for them, but also useful for the community they are immersed in. So for me, mediation is the word for that, and that is the role of
in terms of
that is the role of
and in terms of materials, I once learned an acronym from Jack Richards, an applied linguist, since you mentioned applied linguistics too, which he suggested that we should make materials SOAR, like SOAR. So he said the S is for supplement, the O is for omit, the A is for adapt, and the R is for replace.
That's it.
And I think sometimes we're more afraid of the O. I think the omitting is what we often don't do. We feel that, you know, if it's in a book, then we must do it. And oh my God, you know, if I omit something that's in the book, and then our students might even point it out, you know, teacher, have you forgotten? Have you forgotten about it? Because you haven't done that section. So the mediation that you're talking about in many, apart from many other ways, has to do with, well, that's why I always remember it, with making the materials soar in all the different ways possible, depending on each student, depending on each class.
We don't teach the book, we teach the students.
Thank God, right? We will be out of a job. If the book did the job, then where would that leave us, right?
That's it. Well, but that's why we mentioned this, the political role of the teacher. That mediation, that let's say enlarging, relating, expanding, right, and making links with our own let's say close surroundings is what make the class, any class, something that is unforgettable and meaningful for students. Again, we don't teach the book, we teach students. And actually what all of us want in the ones who are in the world of teaching, no matter what we teach, is that our students are able to do something with that teaching. We would like, or in my opinion, I'm always saying that, because it is, we should consider that is, even if I am right, it is just my opinion, right? But that we empower our students. We want our students to transform the world, to take action. So, but we should, let's say, not only empower them, but also allow that to happen in our classes. So in my opinion, I would say that this could be done. In the end, I am a literature teacher, and I'm always relate this with literature. For me, mentoring and the arts, right, are, and also community projects are the key for that. If we don't link our English class with something else, it is just an English class.
Okay, it's been so nice talking to you, and I was about to ask you if you would like to leave us with a final remark, and I think that's such a powerful concept. I think to the extent that all of us understand that through our subjects we can teach something else, we can teach critical thinking skills, we can teach students sometimes a simple example like, you know, the passive voice. Well, what can be hidden behind that use of the passive voice? Is somebody maybe refusing to accept responsibility for something? So I think to the extent that all of us understand how our subjects can be a means, as you said, for our students to change the world and to see that they can take action in the world, then our job will be twice as done.
Well, you know that teachers are named as dreamers in a way, right? And I'm happy to be a dreamer in that sense. But I mean, dreams are just dreams. If you would like something to happen, you should work for that to happen. And I strongly believe that there is something that could be changed, and that is changing, and that new generations are showing that in taking action for the, let's say, the expansion of knowledge and the collaboration and the let's say awareness of the fact that the content has changed. It's not vocabulary and grammar any longer. It is vocabulary, grammar, and something else that has an impact on the society we live on. Otherwise, right, there is no sense, or actually we have a very selfish look on education. So as we mentioned in this talk, actually, that we've been working together for a while, we should move on from the language class. Actually, right, for me is that, like, transcend that, expand on that. There are many colleagues around Argentina and Latin America and the rest of the world that work in that sense, and that move forward, right, onto the expansion of knowledge, and to understand that either listening or speaking or reading and writing are social practices. So, well, I don't know. I hope that you have enjoyed this talk as much as I did.
Thank you so much, Oke, for making time. I know how busy you are. And well, we both have the FAAPI conference coming up next week. And so for you to make time, yes, back in person.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your time. And thank you everybody who has joined for listening. And sorry if we couldn't read all the comments or questions that you were offering, but thank you for being there. So, okay, I'll see you next week in person in Jujuy in the northeast of Argentina. And remember everybody that in November the 19th, that's the online conference for NALDIC. You can sign up on the NALDIC's website. So you have a combination of an in-person event coming up if you're in Argentina, and this online event for NALDIC, which you can attend from any part of the world. Thank you ever so much.
I will see you in both, right? Thank
yes,
you.
And we'll toast.
Okay, we'll have toast, definitely. Thank you, Leanne. Thank you very much.
Thank you for accepting the invitation.
Okay. All right, okay. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
See you.
Bye.